Alright. Alright, Part 1508, Terminology and Index. Terminology Act, affecting the categorical exclusion, cooperative agency, council, cumulative impact, effective environmental assessment, environmental document, environmental impact statement, the federal agency, finding no other significant impact, human environmental jurisdiction by law, lead agency, legislation, major federal action, matter, mitigation, National Environmental Policy Act process, notice of intent, proposal, referring agency scope, specialty, expertise, significant tearing. Alright, 15081, terminology of the other parts shall be uniform throughout the federal government. 15082, the Act meaning the National Environmental Policy Act. This is made within Title 42 U.S. Code 4321, also referred to as Nepa. 15803, affecting. Affecting means will may have an effect on, affecting means will or may have an effect on. 15804, categorical exclusion, meaning the category of the actions not individually, cumulatively have significant effect with the human environment, which have been found to have no significant effect with the procedure adopted by federal agency implemented the regulation 15073, whether their either environmental assessment or another environmental impact statement is required, and an agency is made to decide whether the procedure otherwise prepare environmental assessments for the region stated in the 15089. Even if it is not required to do so, any procedure under this section shall provide the extraordinary circumstances when the normally excluded action may have significant environmental effect. 15805, cooperating agency. Cooperating agency means any federal agency other than lead agency which have the jurisdiction, law, expertise, reason, respect to environmental impact involved, the proposal of the reasonable alternative for the legislation or other federal action significantly affecting the quality of the human environmental action responsibility of the cooperation agency described in 51016 and the state and local agency similar qualification wherever the effect of the are on reservation. An Indian agency tribe of the May agreement, a lead agency become a cooperative agency. 15806, council means the council on environmental quality established by the Title II of this act. 15807, the cumulative impact of the environmental with resulting incremental impact of action when added to the other paths of the present reasonable foreseeable future action regardless of the agent, federal or non-federal, the person undertakes such other action. Cumulative impact can result in the individual minor but collectively significant action taking place over a period of time. 15808 effects. Effects are the direct effects caused by the action when they occur at the same time and place. The indirect effects are caused by the action in later time and the further removed in distance still reasonable foreseeable. Indirect effects may include growth, but including effects the other effects related to include changing the pattern of land use, population density, growth related effects on the air, water, and other natural systems, include ecosystems. Effects and impacts are usually the regulation, but the synonymous effects include the ecological, such effect of the natural resource for the components and structural functioning, effect of the ecosystem, idiostatic, historic, and cultural, economic, social health, or welfare, direct, indirect, cumulative effects may also include those resulting from the action which may have the both beneficial and detrimental effects if in on the balance of the agency believe that its effect was beneficial. 15089, Environmental Assessment. Environmental assessment means the concise public document for which the federal agency responsible for the serve of the briefly provide with such evidence as announced to determine whether the prior environmental impact statement, the finding of the non-significant impact, aid of the merger compliance with the act with no environmental impact statement is necessary. Facility preparation of the statement of one is necessary. Shall include a brief discussion of the need of the proposal alternatives was required in section 1022E with the environmental impact with the proposed action alternative with the listing of the agency and person consulted. 1500810, Environmental Document. Environmental document include the document that was specified in 15089, Environmental Assessment, 1500811, the Environmental Impact Statement, 1500813, finding no significant impact, 1500822, notice of intent. 1500811, the Environmental Impact Statement. The Environmental Impact Statement means the detailed written statement is required by Section 1022C of this Act. 1500812, the federal agency, it means that all agency of the federal government does not mean the Congress, judiciary, or the president, including performance of the staff function for the president in his executive office, also include for the purpose of these regulations states, unions, general, local government, and Indian tribes assuming the National Environmental Policy Act responsibility under Section 104H of the Housing and Community Development Act of 1974. Alright, 15083, finding non-significant impact. Finding non-significant impact means the document federal agency briefly presents for the reason for the why the inaction not otherwise excluded. 15084 will not have significant effect for the human environment, therefore which the environmental impact statement therefore will not be prepared shall include the environmental assessment and their summary of it, and shall know any other environmental documents related to the 15017 the A5 of the assessment is included for the finding not need not to repeat any of the discussion assessment by incorporated by reference. Alright, 1508.14, human environment shall be interpreted with the comprehensively include the natural physical environmental relationship of the person with the environment as a definition of the effect. 1508.8, meaning of the economical social effects not intended with themselves that require preparation of the environmental impact statement. The environmental impact statement that prepare with the economic, social, natural, physical, environmental effects are interested within environmental impacts will discuss all the effects of the human environment. 1508.15, jurisdiction by law, meaning the agency authority to approve the veto of the finance, all and part of the proposal. 1508.16, lead agency, meaning the agency with the preparing having the primary responsibility for preparing environmental impact statement. 1508.17, legislation include with the bill legislative proposal the Congress developed with and the cooperation with the support of federal agency, but doesn't include the request for the appropriation for the significant cooperation with the proposal. In fact, the predominantly of the other agencies rather than another sort of the drafting does not constitute significant cooperation. Pro the legislation include the request of the ratification treaties. Only the agency has primary responsibility for the subject matter involved that will prepare legislative environmental impact statements. Alright, 1508.18, major federal action. Major federal action includes acts effective with a potential subject of the federal control. Responsible major reinforced that doesn't have the mean independently significantly actions include with the circumstance of whether responsible official will failure to act reviewable of the courts of administrative the tribunal with using under the administrative procedural act other applicable laws for the agency action. Actions include new and continuing activities including projects with the programs entirely with a partially financed, assisted, conducted, regulated, or approved by federal agencies. New revised agency rules, regulations, plan of the policy of the procedure, legislative proposals. 1506.8 and 1508.17. Actions do not include the finding assistance solely in the form of the General Revenue Sharing Fund distributed under the State Local Official Assistance Act of 1972, with no federal agency control of the subsequent use of the such funds. Action does not include the bringing judicial, administrative, civil, and criminal enforcement action. Federal action shall have tend to fail within one of the following categories. 1. Adoption of official policies such as rules, regulations, interpretations adopted the presumed Administrative Procedure Act, Title 5 U.S. Code 551, a 10 sequence of the treaties, international conventions, agreement, the formal documents establishing agency policies which will result in substantial alter agency programs. Adoption of formal plans such as official documents prepared and approved by the federal agencies which provide guide prescribed alternative use of federal resources upon which the future agencies will be based. Adopt the programs such as group concerted actions, implement specific policy plans, systematic connected agency decision, allocation agency resource that implement specific statutory program, executive directive, approval of specific projects such as construction management activity located in the defined geographical area. Projects include the action approved by permanent other regulatory decision as well as federal and federally assistant activities. Alright, 1508.19, matter include the purpose of part 1504, which with respect to the Environmental Protective Agency, any proposed legislation, project, action, regulation of these terms under used in Section 309 of the Clean Air Act, and with respect to all other agencies, any proposed major federal action with the section of the National Environmental Protection Policy Act applies. 1508.2.20, mitigation include avoiding impact altogether, but taking certain action for the part of the action, minimize the impact, limiting the degree of the magnitude of the action, implementation, rectifying the impact of the repairing, rehabilitation, restoring effect of the environment, reducing and eliminating impact over the time of the preservation, mainly of the operation during the life cycle, life of the action, compensating for the impact of the replacement, providing substitute the resource of the environment. 1508.21, National Environmental Policy Act process. National Environmental Policy Act process means all measures necessary for the compliance with the requirements of Section 2, Title 1, National Environmental Policy Act. Alright, 1508.22, Notice of Intent. Notice of Intent means the notice of the environmental impact statement that shall be prepared and serve with the notice shall briefly describe the proposed action possible, alternative describe the agency proposed scoping of the process to include whether, when, and where any scope of what meetings will be held, statement of the name of the address for the person within the agency who can answer questions for the proposed action with the environmental impact statement. 1508.23, proposal exists at the stage of the development of the action with the agency subject of the act has the goal of actively preparing and making the decision one or more alternative means of accomplishing the goal of the effects of the being fully evaluated preparing an environmental impact statement of the proposal should be timed in 1502.5 so the final statement that shall be completed within the time of the statement to include any of the recommendation prior or report of the proposal may exist in fact if it was in the agency's declaration of the one exists. Alright, 1508-24, referring agency means that the federal agency will refer to any matter council after determination of the matter with the unsatisfactory from the standpoint of the public health and welfare environmental quality. 1508-25, scope to consider the range of the action, the alternative of the impact of the considered and environmental impact statement, the scope of the individual statement that made it dependent on the relationship with the other statement, the 1502-20 and the 1508-28. To determine the scope of the environmental impact statement, the agency shall consider three types of action, three types of alternative, three types of impact. They include action other than unconnected signal action, which may be connected to action immediately. They are closely related, therefore should discover the same impact statement actions are connected. And if they automatically trigger other actions which may require environmental impact statements cannot or will not proceed unless the other actions are taken previously simultaneously or interdependent parts of the larger action depending on the larger action for their justification. Cumulative action which review the other proposed action cumulatively significant impact should there be discussed of the same impact statement. The similar action when reviewed of the other reasonable foreseeable proposed agency's action has similarity to that provided with the basis of the evaluating environmental consequences together with such for the common time and the geographic of the agency may wish to analyze these actions, same impact statement that should do so, but the best way to assess for the adequately with combined impact, similar action, reasonable alternative to such actions is to treat them in a single impact statement. Alternatives which include no action, alternative to other reasonable course of the action, mitigation measure and proposed action, impacts which may be to one direct, two indirect, and three cumulative. Alright, we're almost done here. Alright, 1508-26, special expertise means a statutory responsibility agency mission related program experience. 1508-27, the significant of the National Environmental Policy Act require with consideration both context and intensity. Context means the significance of the action for the be analyzed, serve the context with the use of society, human and national, affected the region, with the affected the interest of the locality. Significant varies with Saying of the proposed action, for instance, for the case of the site, specific action, significantly usually dependent upon the effects of the local rather than the world as a whole. Both short and long-term effects that are relevant intensity for the refer to the severity of the impact. Reasonable official must be bearing in mind more than one agency make the decision or partial aspect of the major action of the following that should be considered in evaluating intensity impacts that may be beneficial for the versus and significant effect that may exist, and even if the federal agency believes that the balance of the effect will be beneficial, the degree of those proposed action affect the public health and safety, the unique characteristics of the geographical area with the proximity, historical, cultural reservoirs, parklands, prime farmlands, wetlands, wild scenic rivers, and other ecological critical area. The degree to which the effects of the quality of human environmental are likely to highly controversial. The degree of the physical on which possible effect of the human environmental are highly uncertain, involving unique and unknown risks. 6. The degree of which the action may be established precedent in the future action with a significant effect for the representative decision in principle about future consideration. Whether the action is related with the other action individually and significant cumulative of the significant impact significantly exists with a reasonable anticipated cumulative of the significant impact on the environment. Significant cannot be avoided by terminating an action temporary with a breaking it down into the smaller component parts. The degree of which the action adversely affects the district sites on highway structures, other objects listed as in our objectable listing, National Register of Historical Places, or may cause less destruction of significant scientific, cultural, or historical resources. The degree to which of the action may be adversely affected with the endangered, threatened species of the habitat has been determined critical under the Endangered Species Act of 1973, and whether the action threatens violation of federal, state, local requirements imposed on the protection of the environment. 1508-28, and tearing refers to coverage of the general matters of the broader environmental impact statement that is such as the National Program Policy Statement, with the subsequent narrow statement of the environmental analysis, such as the regional basin-wide program statements of the ultimately site-specific statement, incorporating the reference of the general discussion with the concentration of the soul of the issue with the specific statement. Subsequent prepared the tiering is appropriate with the subsequent sequence of the statement of the analysis from program and policy environmental impact statement with the program plan with the statement of analysis with the later scope of the side of the specific statement of analysis. And from environmental impact statement of the specific action in early stage such for the need of the site selection supplement, which is preferred the subsequent statement of analysis for the later stage, such as environmental mitigation and tearing, and in such case it appropriate when it helps the lead agency to focus on the issues with the ripe decision excluded from the consideration issue already decided or not yet ripe. And then it has the index through parts 1500 through 1508. National Environmental Policy. So that was part. That was your part 1508 National Environmental Policy Act.